This stuff we're going to be learning is Bava Batra Daf Kuf Ayin Gimel. We're going to get started in a second. Okay. This week's learning is sponsored by Robert and Paula Cohen in loving memory of my grandfather, Joseph Cohen, Yosef ben Moshe Cohen, Zichrono Livracha. My grandfather was hardworking, loved to sing, especially as a chazan, and brought up his family to be committed to our Masorah. May his memory be blessed. We are going to get started. A few quick announcements. Excited to be launching Daf Mishalahen today. We'll go up later this morning. It's a Shiur we had a few years ago in Hebrew. Now it'll be in English with their intro to Masechet Sanhedrin, which is all reminder that we're starting with Masechet Sanhedrin. We also have new content in Hebrew, Dr. Meirav Tubal Kahana, for those who want to listen in Hebrew. Also, her intro to Sanhedrin will be going up today. We'll be having our usual intros later this week. And what else did I want to talk about? Our Siyum obviously is Wednesday night. A reminder, there's no regular class on Wednesday morning. We'll be learning on Tuesday, the daf for Wednesday. I haven't decided definitively where I'm going to start. So on Wednesday at the Siyum, debating whether to start a little bit further down in the daf. If so, then we'll learn it on Tuesday. So just make sure before you get to the Siyum on Wednesday that you've learned the daf Tuesday with either with us, or if not, at least you've checked like to where we finished. Okay. And I think that's about it. We're going to get started. Oh, and Alana Steinhain her shiur should go up later today, Din and Daf for this week, which is kind of an overview of Masechet Bava Batra. So definitely a worthwhile listen. And we're going to get started. So what we saw yesterday, a quick review just to get the inyanim. We had a Mishnah at the end of the Mishnah was about the two Yosef and Shimon's and all the confusions between them and which things they can do, which things they can't do. Okay, so if you have two Yosef and Shimon's in the city, we learned in the Mishnah, they can't bring a shtar chov one on the other. We'll explain that later today. Like Yosef and Shimon's borrowed money from Yosef and Shimon, and one has the shtar, he can't collect the money from the other. No one can go collect money from Yosef ben Shimon in the city because each Yosef ben Shimon can say, "Oh, that's not me. Oh, that's not me." And as usual, the burden of proof is on the person trying to get the money, so there's no way to do it. Now, we did seem to indicate, though, that they each can claim money from somebody else, though. Okay, and that is going to be where we're going to start today. Okay, so I don't want to go back over all of them a bit, but we had this case of Mimcha, and then we tried to compare it to our Mishnah. And in the end, we said it's different. And why is it different? Because we said that in the case of Mimcha, we're worried that, like, if it just says, so and so owes money to me, and me doesn't have a name at all, so that whoever holds the star can't collect because there's a concern it could have fallen from anybody and picked up by anybody. That's what we call choshesh and linafila. Whereas Yosef ben Shimon to Yosef ben Shimon, right? If it fell from one Yosef ben Shimon and went to the other Yosef ben Shimon, which we inferred already that Yosef ben Shimon can collect a star from other people, right? Other people can't collect from him, but he can collect a star. Why could he collect a star? Aren't we worried maybe it fell from one Yosef ben Shimon and went to the other? And the Gemara answers, right? Or Abaye answers really, or the Gemara answers for Abaye, who asked this question on Rabba, who thought you could collect, anyway, thought they were comparable. He said, no, they're different. In the Mimcha case, we're worried that it fell because it it's a lot of people. Now, there's actually a deliberation among the commentaries. Who are we worried about? A lot of people. There's a lot of potential people who could have been the borrower, or there's a lot of potential people that could have been the creditor. In other words, is it that a lot of people could have dropped this and anyone, and this person could have picked it up? Or one person could have dropped it, but a lot of people could have picked it up. It could have been picked up by anybody. So it could be one or the other. Okay, there happens to be a debate about it. It was one of those things I was a little confused about. I wasn't sure who's the Rabbim. And in fact, I saw that there was a machloket in the commentaries about who's the Rabbim. Okay, I think I saw it um, in the Rashbam, and he quotes, the Rashbam says one, and then he quotes Rabbeinu Hananel, who says the other. It's the last Rashbam on the page. Okay, that's just a side point. But the main idea being that in the case of Yosef and Shimon, the fact that one Yosef and Shimon might have dropped it and it was picked up by the other Yosef and Shimon, that is highly unlikely, and therefore we're not concerned for that. So that's going to lead us to try to understand the next issue. Right now, that perfectly explains the Mishnah. Why in our Mishnah we're allowing Yosef and Shimon to collect the star if it's in his hands. Okay, we assume it's his. Okay, we're not worried it fell from the other Yosef and Shimon and he picked it up. However, our Gemara starts off with quoting a braita where it says the opposite of our Mishnah. In the end, we're going to have three braita with three different variations of different halachot, okay, in the Mishnah that differ from our Mishnah, each one in a different way. Elahaditanya, it says in a braita, kashem she'em motziim shtarchov zal zeh, just like they each can take a shtarchov one on the other, which again, we haven't really explained why. Yosef and Shimon can't collect a loan from Yosef and Shimon, even if in his shtar it says Yosef and Shimon lent money to Yosef and Shimon. Kach em motziim al achirim. Also, Yosef and Shimon can't collect from anybody in the city. Now that goes clearly against an inference from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah never talked about it, but we assume because the Mishnah said people can't collect from Yosef and Shimon, but didn't say Yosef and Shimon can't collect from other people. It must be you could. So now we have to figure out what's the root of the machloket? Whether Yosef and Shimon could collect a loan that he was owed or not. Okay, so Yosef and Shimon pulls out a document that says Yosef and Shimon lent money to Miriam Bat Rivka. Can they collect it or not? So the machloket is otiyot niknot b'misira kamiflage. Back to our topic of otiyot niknot b'misira. Since we already said we're not chosheshin l'nefila, we're not concerned that the other Yosef and Shimon's document fell from one and got into the hands of the other, which would mean if we're not concerned with that, right? Well, then what are we concerned with? Obviously, someone's concerned with something here in the braita. So what could possibly happen? Well, it could be that one gave the document to the other. And in other words, if it didn't fall, and if it's not, it's obviously one option is it's really my document, right? Let's say I'm Yosef and Shimon. I lent money to someone. That's my document. Okay, that's obvious. That's the default. But if you say you can't collect it, right, or you can, and there's this debate. Well, what's the other possibility? We're not worried it fell. How else could it get into my hands? Well, it could be the other Yosef and Shimon gave it to me. And then, okay, if I got it from someone with the same name as me, what do we learn? Otiyot niknot b'misira. So even if now this happens to be it's the same name as me, but it wasn't really mine. But if we hold otiyot niknot b'misira, it becomes mine, and therefore I could collect from it anyway. So basically, we're assuming I got it either because it was mine originally or because it was given to me by the other person. If it was given to me, well, then it's mine. Basically, I can collect from it. Just like if you bought a house and gave me the document that says you bought the house, but you gave it to me, I acquire it. Okay, that's if you hold otiyot niknot b'misira. So Tana Didan Savar, the Tana of our Mishnah holds otiyot niknot b'misira. And that's why Yosef and Shimon can collect this document, because either it was Yosef and Shimon's to begin with, or it was the other ones, but how did Yosef and Shimon the second get it? Because Yosef and Shimon the first gave it to him, and otiyot niknot b'misira. Okay, what about the braita? Very simply. Tana Bar Savar ein otiyot niknot b'misira. You can't just hand over a document and it'll be acquired by the person. There's no such thing. It doesn't work that way. If really Yosef and Shimon the first wanted to give it to Yosef and Shimon the second, Yosef and Shimon the first needed to write a new document saying Yosef and Shimon is giving over the document. They would have to have a whole new document. So now, then how did Yosef and Shimon the second get it? In other words, then we're going to say, then it must have been Yosef and Shimon the seconds. If that's the case, Yosef and Shimon the second should be able to collect it from the... Comes the Rashbam and explains what is the Tana of the braita hold. He basically says the following, and again, here comes someone, Yosef and Shimon II, who's trying to get money from Joe Schmo, and he says, mitoch kach yidche haloveh lezeh, or before we called her Miriam Bar Rivka, let's call her that. Miriam Bar Rivka could come and say, v'yomar pikadonu etzlecha. Maybe Yosef and Shimon I gave you his document to watch. Now, maybe that was not the smartest idea. But obviously, Yosef ben Shimon I trusted Yosef ben Shimon II. And Yosef ben Shimon II later stabbed him in the back. Okay, that happens. Sometimes we trust people mistakenly. And yeah, so basically, Yosef ben Shimon the second comes to collect the money. And she says, maybe Yosef ben Shimon I gave it to you. Now, you could say, well, then maybe Yosef ben Shimon I could then claim it. Well, the Ulizeh Yomar, she'll say to the first Yosef ben Shimon, you have no proof. You can't collect this loan. It's not in your hands. So nobody can collect it. But the Rashbam adds something very interesting, which is why I wanted to read the Rashbam. But if the two of them get together, the two Yosef and Shimons, it's clear she owes money to one Yosef and Shimon. So if one gives Yipoi Koch, power of attorney, to the other, then one of them can definitely claim it then. In other words, one can say, I'm giving over, if it's mine, I'm giving my rights to the other. The other one can claim it, and then they could split it 50-50. So if they work together, they can actually get at least half. But neither one is able to get the whole thing, and if they don't work together, nobody can get anything. So that's if you hold ein otiyot niknot b'mesira. And that's one potential way to understand the debate between the Mishna and the braita. The Gemara is going to now suggest a different option, which is ibait ema, you could say, everybody thinks otiyot niknot b'mesira. And if in fact Yosef ben Shimon the first gave it to Yosef ben Shimon the second as a gift, you can collect my loan for me. Yosef ben Shimon the second can collect it. And we're not worried about it's maybe a pikadon. We just, right, but maybe we are. Why does the braita not allow this? Because even if you hold otiyot niknot b'mesira, how do you know? In other words, Yosef ben Shimon the second has this document. What do we say? Either it was Yosef ben Shimon the second to begin with. Okay, it was his shtarchov. He was the creditor. Or it was given by Yosef ben Shimon the first. But there's two possibilities of how he could have given it. He could have given it to say, I'm giving you my shtarchov as a gift, or maybe even sold it, who knows. Or maybe it was a pikadon. So now we have a machloket. B'tzarich lavi ra'aya kamiflage. The machloket is, even if you say otiyot niknot b'mesira, and if Yosef ben Shimon the first gave it to Yosef ben Shimon the second as a gift, and it's now Yosef ben Shimon the second's, and therefore he should be able to collect it. But does Yosef ben Shimon the second have to prove that it was given to him as a gift? That this otiyot was nikneh b'mesira? Do you have to prove it, or can you just claim it? Okay, because in other words, again, why else would you have the document? Here we don't seem to be as worried as pikadon if you hold ein tzarich levi raya. So Tana Didan, our Mishnah holds, Savar ein tzarich levi raya. You don't have to bring proof. It's in your hands. It must be. Yosef ben Shimon the first gave it to you. And that's enough. Otiyot niknot b'mesira. He must have given to you. There's no point to bring a proof. Tana Bar Savar, the Tana of the braita holds, tzarich lahavi raya. Tana of the braita says, you can't, Yosef ben Shimon the second can't collect this loan because it's possible that it was given and then it would have been fine, even though no new document was written, right? Yosef ben Shimon the first gave it to Yosef ben Shimon the second. But without proof that it was given, we need someone who watched the transaction of Yosef ben Shimon the first handed over to Yosef ben Shimon the second and say, this is a gift to you, it's yours. Without that, okay, it might be, technically it works, otiyot niknot b'mesira, but if you have no proof, maybe it's a pikadon, as we said before, right? Maybe he was just giving it to you to watch for him. So he handed it to you, but he didn't hand it to you for the purposes of acquiring it. That wouldn't work. So that's the machloket. Do you have to bring proof or do you not have to bring proof? And in fact, if you think we're just making up, okay, maybe that's the root of the debate between the Mishna and the braita. Well, in fact, there is a machloket between Abaye and Rava about exactly this issue. And then what we're doing is we're superimposing the later debate that happened between Abaye and Rava, fourth generation of Amoraim. We're superimposing that on the Tanaitic debate between the Mishnah and the braita. The Itmar, as it said, otiyot niknot b'mesira. Abaye amar tzarich lavi raya. Rava amar eino tzarich lavi raya. So here's our debate. Abaye says you need to bring a proof, and Rava says you don't need to bring a proof. If I'm holding a document that says that you bought land from so-and-so, but it's in my property, I can use that to prove it's my land because otiyot niknot b'mesira, and I don't need to prove it. Okay, and that would match our Mishnah's opinion, right? That's what we said before. Our Mishnah, who says Yosef ben Shimon can collect the loan, is because either it was his or it was given to him by the other person, and there's no need for proof. The braita says you can't collect it. Now it's going to be a little different than we thought before. Not that you can never collect it. Yosef ben Shimon the second can collect it if he proves, if he has witnesses to prove that Yosef ben Shimon the first passed him over the document. Then he can collect it. But short of that, no. Okay, now we're going to have two versions of a braita. The braita has one version, but either Abaye brings this braita as a proof for his position, or Rava brings the braita as a proof for his position. The same logic is employed here. You'll see how each one proves from the same source, understanding it in the same way, but its ramifications are understood as differently. Okay, and we'll get to it in a minute, and you'll see what I mean. So the first version of the sugya goes like this: Amar Abaye mina amina. Abaye says, where do I get my opinion from that you have to bring proof, though? If you acquired a document through Masira, you would have to bring a proof. How do I know this? Because it says, In a braita, detanya, echa min ha'achim, shashtar chov yotze mitachat yado. Okay, we have a situation, the father dies, and one of the brothers pulls out an IOU of the father's. Now remember, it says the father is owed the money, not the son, which normally we'd say, oh, that belongs to the father, split evenly between all the sons. But what does that son say? Oh, I got it before my father died. He gave it to me as a gift, right? Think about it. If you take someone's jewelry, for example, right, that's divided up after they die, or artwork or whatever it might be, right? So whatever's left is divided, but if the parent gave the child the gift in their lifetime, then it belongs to that child. There's no argument between the siblings. Oh, I wanted that. Oh, I wanted that, because the parent already gifted it to them before. So obviously it's theirs. So now we have this case where the one of the brothers pulls out an IOU in the father's name. This is why it's otiyot, niknot, and claims the father gave it to him as a gift before he died. Alav lahavi ra'aya. What does it say here? The brother has to prove that he was given it as a gift. So what do you see there? Otiyot, niknot, you need proof. Because it doesn't say the son's name in it. The father didn't rewrite the document that now so-and-so owes the son money. So it was otiyot, niknot, but without proof, the son doesn't get it. To which Rava says, you can't use that as a proof, right? So Abaye says, first one more line, my lav huadin lachrine, right? Just it happens with father and son. It would be the same thing for anybody else. So it'd just be a classic case of otiyot, niknot, mesira. So what if it's a father to son, me to you? It's all one and the same. To which Rava says, no. Rava amal shane achim deshamtu mehadade. This is very common, and I think what they're saying is even particularly just before death, the children are in the house, and there's all sorts of things around, and the children might just take something and claim that it was their own. And it's much more likely there, and that's why the children have to bring proof. And in fact, some of the commentaries say it's even more than that. It's moreh heter. Moreh heter means, right, we justify. It's not like I'm stealing by taking something of my parents. I always had a proclivity, this item, I know my father will want me to have this, or my mother will want me to have that piece of jewelry, or, somehow like I feel like I have ownership of it already. So it's more likely I'll just take it with, and really believe almost, right? Delude myself into believing that it was really meant for me. So because of that, there's more of a need to bring a proof here. In a regular case, if what would I be doing with your IOU if not that you had given it to me? It's not like there's no need for proof in that case. So that's how Rava rejects the proof. Now, on that same logic, we're going to read the sugya in the reverse. The Rava starts off, what's my proof? And he quotes this braita, exact same braita, and what does he prove from here? Well, look at this case. It's with brothers. Why is it with brothers? Because specifically with brothers, you have to bring proof, but not in any other case. Let's read that inside. Because they're always trying to, grab something over another. Therefore, the brother has to bring proof because it's more likely that he kind of justified and took it for himself when really that's stealing, and he would have to prove it if it's really his own. And he really received it from the father. But achrine lo, but you don't have to worry about that in the regular case. So it's the exact same logic. It's just that Rava brought this from the start, saying this is clearly only brothers and not anybody else. And basically saying, why else would the case be brothers? If they wanted to prove otiyot, niknot, mesira, you need to bring proof, it would have brought a case of a regular person. To which Abaye gives a retort here and says, Abaye, achim itzrichale. No, there's a reason why they specifically brought a case of brothers. And here it's going to be we're going to take the same logic, but flip it. Sal kadat achamina, you might have thought, kevan deshamtu me'adade, since brothers are likely to do this kind of thing before their father's death, ema mizdeher zahire. Maybe the other brothers are always watching them. Maybe nobody lets anybody out of sight. You're trying to imagine this scene, right? The father's on the deathbed and the brothers are wandering around the house, looking in rooms, looking at documents. The other brothers are checking up on them. And maybe there wouldn't even be a need for a proof because they're so careful to prevent the other brothers from doing this kind of thing. They already know to expect it. Maybe they wouldn't need to bring a proof. Everybody needs to bring a proof if you have someone else's document, but maybe not brothers with their father's name on it. Well, Kamash Malan, that's why this braita had to specifically tell you brothers, they also need to bring proof. And then Abaye says, see, this could prove my opinion and not yours. So we had different ways of understanding whether this source could be a proof for either side. In any case, we're left with a machloket. So what we did so far is we brought a braita with a different opinion about one particular line in the Mishnah. In fact, it wasn't even a line in the Mishnah; it was an inference from the Mishnah that Yosef and Shimon could collect a loan. The braita said Yosef and Shimon can't collect any loans because maybe it's not his document. And then we said either it's otiyot, niknot, and mesiras the machloket between the Mishnah and the braita, or it's do you need to prove even if otiyot, niknot, and mesira, is there a need to prove that it was actually handed to you or not? Now we're moving on to a third braita, a third source, a third Tanaitic source, second braita. Okay, we have our Mishnah, first braita, and now we're on the second braita. And here they're going to have a different opinion about a different line in the, and it's going to disagree both with the first braita and with our Mishnah. Elahaditanya, kishem shemotziin shtar chov al achirim. Okay, now what about this braita? They're saying, right? It's introduced with Elahaditanya, but this braita, how are you going to explain the logic here? So what is it? Just like, so far we haven't read the important part, just like motziin hein shtar chov al achirim. Now this agrees with our Mishnah. Yosef and Shimon can go collect a loan. That's not a problem. Well, they can also produce a shtar of Yosef and Shimon and Yosef and Shimon. So if there's two Yosef and Shimons in the city, and one says, look, I have an IOU that you owe me money, he can collect the money. Now, we never really explained in the Mishnah why he can't collect the money according to our Mishnah. But both the first braita and our Mishnah thought they can't collect the shtar of Zalzeh, and this braita says you can. So, what's the root of the machloket? This was a Mishnah we saw a few pages ago, that a love is allowed to write a document, an IOU, can go to a sofer and say, please write me a document that I'm borrowing money from so-and-so, even if the malva doesn't know about it, okay? Why is that? Because the malva only serves to gain from this situation, right? It's obvious, because basically it'll be that the lova owes the malva money. So it's in the best interest of the malva, and therefore the malva doesn't need to be there. There's no harm that can be done to the malva. Well, maybe there is, and that's what we're going to discuss right now. So the machloket is what we saw in our Mishnah, a few Mishnah, I can't remember how many Mishnayot ago, maybe even just one Mishnah ago, but it was on, I don't remember, but just recently we saw this Mishnah that you can write a shtar for the lova even if the malva is not there. That's actually a source of debate. Tana Didan Savar, so our Mishnah, which makes sense because our Mishnah is in the same chapter as the other Mishnah, holds Kotvim shtar lelova alpha pisha emal ve'imo. And therefore, okay, so if you can write the shtar, that's going to lead us to say, since the love can write the shtar without the malve, therefore Yosef and Shimon can't pull out a shtar chov on Yosef and Shimon. Why not? You can already probably figure it out, but if not, I'll explain it as the Gemara does. Okay, my name is Michelle Farber. I go to the sofer and I say to a sofer and witnesses, listen, I'm borrowing money from another Michelle Farber. Can you write out the document for me? It says Michelle Farber lent money to Michelle Farber. Okay. And because I'm borrowing money from her. Now, if we say we write a shtar for a love, even not in the presence of the malva, they'll write the shtar for me. And then, right, Amar lehu kitvu li shtar de'ina lemezav mi Yosef ben Shimon chavri. Go write me a document that says I want to borrow money from the other Yosef and Shimon. Ubatar de katve v'chat mele. And as soon as they write it and sign it, what is right? Me, Michelle Farber, I go, and what do? Nikita, I take the shtar, and I pretend now I'm the malve. I switch positions. And now I go to the other Michelle Farber, and what do I say? Amarle, havli mea, de Yasef minai. And I say, oh, here's a shtar. You owe me 100 shekels. Okay? So obviously that's a problem. And therefore, our Mishnah says that's why you can't be motzi shtar chov zalzeh. Because theoretically, they'll write a shtar for me saying I'm borrowing money, and then I'll just claim I'm actually the creditor. Tana bara savar in kutvin shtar lelova ad she'emal v'imo, and the Tana the braita says this they'll never do this. This can't ever happen because you don't write a shtar for a lova without the malva. There's just a case someone would do this, and therefore not. Now you have to wonder why they would just say you can only not do it in a case where you have the same name, right? It's a good question. I don't know why, but okay, that's the machloket on that issue. Now we go back to our Mishnah. The Mishnah said a line which actually seems to also go against something else it said in the Mishnah. Now, the way we understood this case is if a borrower, if the creditor, the malve, has a shtar, in other words, creditor has a shtar that says Yosef and Shimon owes me money, and both Yosef and Shimon's owe him money. And then he has a star, which is really a shovar, that says the star of Yosef and Shimon has already been paid back. But we don't know which Yosef and Shimon. So if that's the case, what did the Mishnah say? He can't collect from either one of the Yosef and Shimon's, okay? Because both could claim, oh, the star you have in your hand that says we paid you is ours, right? That's me. And the other one could say, that's me. You can't collect. Now, there's a problem with the assumption of this Mishnah, which is what? Well, Tama dinimtza halon nimtza mati mapik. Wait a minute. This says if the Malva has a document that says Star of Yosef and Shimon has already been paid back, then they can't collect the star, a chov from Yosef and Shimon. But if he didn't have this star, this shovar that says it was paid, it sounds like he'd be able to collect from Yosef and Shimon alone. What did the Mishnah say? Remember? Vaha anan, didn't we, and the last word in this line is going to be tnan, could have read it like ha anan tnan, didn't we learn in our Mishnah? Below acher yacholot tziyalehen shtar chov. There's no case where a malva can put out a shtar chov of Yosef and Shimon because Yosef and Shimon could always say, that's not me, that's not me. So it should matter. Why are you saying only if he has a shovar? Even if he doesn't have a shovar that says it was paid, right? That case makes no sense because the assumption of that case is that if he didn't have the star that said one of them already paid me back, he'd be able to collect. But we already know he can't collect from either one of them because each one can claim, that's not me, it's the other one. So something doesn't make sense here. So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah b'mishulashin. This must be a case where they had a shtar chov on Yosef and Shimon because the name was written as Yosef and Shimon ben Yaakov to differentiate from Yosef and Shimon ben Yosef, or no, Yosef and Shimon ben Avraham. Okay, so it must have been that it's obvious who the shtar was for because they did three names, and that's the case where we already learned that in the Mishnah. If it was Mishulashim, you put three generations, then you can collect a shtar chov because that differentiates one from the other. So then the Gemara asks, well, I don't get it. If we're already talking about Mishulashim, then we assume also the Shavar was Mishulashim, in which case, why don't we just see whose Shavar it is if they wrote three generations? So Amar Rav Ashaya, the obvious Gemara answer, b'Mishulashim b'shtar ve'Mishulashim b'shavar. In other words, he pulled out an IOU that said Yosef ben Shimon ben Yaakov owes me money. And the shovar says, so he knows who the chov was for. But since he has a shovar that says Yosef ben Shimon paid me back money, and it doesn't say ben Yaakov or ben Avraham, therefore Yosef ben Shimon ben Yaakov can claim, oh, that was me, and not pay the money back. So that must be the case. Abaye has a totally different answer, and he understands the case in the Mishnah entirely different, which would preclude the whole question in the first place. Abaye amar hachi kamar. This is what it really meant to say. It's not that the shtar was found among a creditor who had two loans out for Yosef and Shimon. The whole case is the reverse. Nimtza lelove ben shtarotav, shtarosa Yosef and Shimon alai parua. There's two malves named Yosef and Shimon, two creditors named Yosef and Shimon. The borrower is someone else, right? Now remember, Yosef and Shimon, according to the Mishnah, can collect a chov. So the borrower, which by the way makes more sense that the shovar is with the borrower. Normally the borrower gets to keep the shovar as proof he paid. So the borrower has a shtar that says, I pay back Yosef and Shimon, but it doesn't say which Yosef and Shimon. And that's what we're talking about. So shtarot shnehem pruim. Basically, neither Yosef and Shimon can claim that person owes them money, because that person could claim, look, I already paid Yosef and Shimon. It could be you, and I don't have to pay either one of you. And then then we don't have the question at all, and when we reinterpret that case entirely. Last line of this section, Ketzad Yasu Yishaleshu. And then we said if Yishaleshu doesn't help, because both of them are Yosef and Shimon ben Yaakov, then what do? We write Kohen, let's say, if the person was a Kohen. So Tana, the braita says, and if you listen to my shiur on Shabbat, you'll laugh at this. Imayushnehem Kohanim, I said, like Michelle Cohen, Jonathan Cohen, and Cohen doesn't necessarily help. So here it says, if they were both Kohanim, and that wouldn't help, Yichtavu Dorot. So go back another generation. And if not, go back another and just keep going until at some point you have some way to differentiate. And that was, again, the resolution to be able to actually have Yosef and Shimon part of this whole world of loans and be involved is, make it more specific. Okay, new Mishnah. Haomer lebino, shtar ben shtarotai parua ve'enu yodea ezehu. This is a totally different situation. but it's another case of hamotzi mechavero alav haraya, which is the burden of proof is on the person trying to get the money. If a father on his deathbed says to his son or his daughter, you're going to see all these promissory notes I have, just know that there's one I already got paid back for. I didn't manage to find the time to rip up the document yet. So it looks like someone owes me money and they don't really, but I don't remember which one it is. Okay, you can imagine something happening on their deathbed. The father doesn't remember, but he's very worried because he doesn't want to go die without closing things and saying, listen, someone actually paid me back. I just don't know who. So at this point, none of the promissory notes can be used because maybe it's that one. And it's a big problem, right? So the child can't collect anything. Shtarot kulam pruim. We view all of them because every person could say, I'm the one that the father, right, that already paid back the father. But if nimtza le'echad sham shnayim, now the father said one promissory note. What if the father had two promissory notes out on a particular person? So if that's the case, hagadol parua, katane no parua. So again, we assume the larger one is already paid back, and the smaller, like let's say he had a loan out for $50 and for $100 from the same person. So only one of them is going to be collected already. So therefore, because hamotzi mechavero alav haraya, it's the $50 one he can collect, not the $100 one. Okay, and then the child can collect the $50 chov. This, by the way, it just reminds me of, when they give you like 50% off the second one, and it's always the cheaper one, right? That they're going to give you the 50% off on never the more expensive one. So it's like that. I'm a Rava. So Rava says, Shtar lecha biyadi parua, hagadol parua, katani no parua. Okay, that's just really a quote from the Mishna, right? If the father says, there's one shtar I have that's collected already, then we say, okay, well then if there's two with one person, we'll be able to collect the smaller one. But chov lecha biyadi parua, there's an obligation of someone to me. Now, an obligation could be, if there's two shtarot, one of $100, one of $50, a chov could be talking about the whole thing. Because in the end, so-and-so owes me $150. That's a chov, that's one obligation, which could be made up of multiple promissory notes. In that case, shtarot kulam pruim, then you can't collect anything, even if you had two from one person. Now, Ravina doesn't like this, that Rava said, and Ravina questions and says, I don't understand. Amarle Ravina l'Rava, he says, you could get to really crazy ramifications according to what you just said. Elameata, from what you just said, Sadim lecha, if I say my field is sold to you, but I don't specify exactly what field, you're going to be able to claim Sadig dola mechuralo, you're going to be able to claim the biggest field that I own. And if I say sadesh yeshli mechuralcha, if I say a field that I have is yours, now the word field could actually be plural also. Could mean your entire, all the fields you have. So kol stodav mechurilo, what is the guy going to be able to claim all your fields? That would be ridiculous. But it sounds like, from what you're saying, it would be the same. To which he says, no, of course not. Hatam ya balashtar la tachtona. You're comparing you're going in the wrong direction in your comparison. In the sale case, okay, there's the seller, right? You would assume you're equating the buyer to the borrower, right? And just like the borrower we side with the borrower, we would side with the buyer. But no, it's not true because you're going to compare the buyer to the creditor. Why are the buyer and the creditor in the same position? Because both of them, even though they're in opposite, right? One is giving, one is taking. They're both the ones holding the document, and the other one is trying to get right there. We're going to say it like this: Hatam ya bala shtar ala tachtona. The one who has the shtar is in the weaker position because the creditor is the one trying to get the money out of the borrower, and the buyer is the one trying to get the money out of the seller. And again, kol hamotzi mechavero, right? Hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. The one who's trying to get the money, the one who has the shtar in hand, but is trying to take something out from somebody else, is always in the weaker position. And therefore, the buyer is not going to be able to get the biggest. They're going to get the smallest field. And they're only going to have a claim on the smallest part, just like the creditor will only have a claim on the smallest amount of money. And that's why your comparison is just wrong. And this is the way to compare it, and then it makes perfect sense. New Mishnah. We're now starting into the laws of Arev, a guarantor. Okay, a promo for the Siyum. When we get to the Siyum, I already have some ideas about why the Masechet ends about a guarantor. Talk about it later. To leave some suspense for the siyum. Hamavet chavero al yedei arev lo yipara min ha'arev. If you loan money to someone with a guarantor, you cannot collect from the guarantor. Okay, now we're going to talk about what this line means. What's the point of a guarantor if you can't collect from them? Look at the first question of the Gemara. So we'll get back to this. Turning now to Amubet. But if you said, I'm loaning you money on the condition that I can collect either from you or the Arev, I can collect from either person. Rashba Gomel, it depends. Even if you condition the loan on the guarantor and I could collect from the guarantor, if the borrower has money, you have to go to the borrower first. You can't go straight to the arev, the guarantor. The guarantor is only there in the event that the borrower doesn't pay. And thus he would also say, by the way, this is a famous case of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Arev. If you remember, there's three cases. We're going to get to it tomorrow, where we don't hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in the Mishna. Usually we do hold like him. This is one of the three we don't. But you're going to see, we're not even clear what Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel actually holds. We're going to see some reinterpretations of this Mishnah as we go along. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says here, if a woman has a guarantee on her ketubah, the husband said, if I don't pay you the ketubah, then my friend will. And then the husband divorces her. Now, there's a concern that we're going to have another concern for what we call a knunya, for deceit. If we have a couple that has no money, and what did Rashbag say? If there's no money, you can go straight to the Arev. So let's say they have no money. So what do they say? The husband's like, oh, look, let's do this. I'll divorce you. You'll collect your ketubah from the Arev, and then I'll remarry you. And then we'll be married and we'll have all that money. Good solution. Okay? So to prevent that, what do we say? Yidirena hana'ah. If a husband wants to divorce his wife and he has no money, right, and there's an arev for the ketubah, we make him, or in any case, I think when there's a guarantor for the ketubah, we make him take a neder, a vow that he will never benefit from this woman, so that he can't remarry her again. Okay, to prevent this type of conspiracy from happening, where the two will conspire together and collect the money from the arev and then remarry. Seems like a bit of a crazy thing to do, to get a divorce just to get money, but people do all sorts of things, as you know. Okay, now the Gemara is going to ask, how could we say in the first line you can't collect from the Arev? My timer. Rabba for Rav Yosef to Amr Travayu. So they both explain this Mishnah. What's the point of the Arev? The Arev can say, Gavra Ashli Mali, I committed to bring you the borrower, to make sure the borrower doesn't disappear. Okay? Gavra Ashli Malach. And I produced for you the lova. The fact that the lova had no money, that's not my problem. I just ensured, the reason I signed on this was to make sure that the lova doesn't disappear, or if the lova dies, then yes, but if the lova is alive, deal with the lova. Lova doesn't have money, that's not my problem. But which, Rav Nachman says that can't possibly be what we're talking about. Matkevla Rav Nachman, Hai Dina de Parsai. That's like the Persian law. We don't go by that. That the Arev doesn't commit anything. Of course the Arev you can collect from the Arev. The Arev isn't just there to just say, okay, well, I produced the lova and now I'm going home. That's not guaranteeing a loan. That's like the Persians, to which the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Adarabah, Batar Arva Azle. The Persians do the opposite of that. Forget the fact that they think the Arev is responsible. They think you could skip the lova. Even if the lova has money, you can go get it straight from the Arev. So how could you say that's the Persian law? To which the Gemara answers, okay, must be Rav Nachman meant something else when he said that. Ela Rav Nachman, my lo yipara min ha'arev. Oh, sorry, I skipped a line. Ela beitina de parsai de lo yave tam alimiltayu. What he meant is, it's like the Persian law that there's no logic to it. In other words, there's no logic to going straight to the Arev, and there's no logic not having the Arev be a guarantor at all. Now, Persian law says one thing, and I said this is like the Persian law because what I meant is, it's like the Persian law that there's no logic to what you're saying at all. Okay, it's totally illogical that an Arev wouldn't be a guarantor for the loan. So therefore, Rav Nachman understands the Mishnah differently. Ela Amar Rav Nachman, my lo yipara min ha'arev, lo yitba arev tchila. What it means, don't go to the Arev. It means don't go to the Arev first. Go first to the lova. Only if the lova doesn't have money, then you go to the Arev. But you can't go directly collect from the Arev. And that's like the Persian law, right? That the Persians go straight to the Arev. We don't do that. And here's a braita to support that reading. Lo yitba arev tchila. Okay, so that's exactly it. Don't go to the arev first. Doesn't mean don't go to the arev at all. That's the version in the braita, which is basically the way we explained our Mishnah right now. V'imamar menashe parami mishertze yitba arev tchila. Only if, and that continues our Mishnah, only if you said on the condition that I'm going to either collect from you or the arev, if that was set out from the beginning, then you could go straight to the arev. But anything short of that, no. Now we want to know the source for arevut in the Torah, and we're going to get to stuff that's coming up in the parsha soon, a few weeks. Amar Rav Huna, minayin la'arev de mishtabed. How do we know an arev is mishuabad, like basically commits, okay, and that you can go collect from the arev if you need to. Dichtiv anochi arvenu miyadi tevakshenu. This is what Yehuda says when they want to bring Binyamin down to Egypt. He goes to his father and he says, I will be the arev, you can demand it from me, meaning I will make sure he gets back. Obviously, it's a little different. It's not a money thing. It's not, you can't replace Binyamin, but basically saying, I will take responsibility, and you see the root arev there. Matkefla Rav Chisda says, that's not arevut, ha-kablanuti. This is kablanut. Dichtiv, we're going to see what kablanut is tomorrow, but kablanut is when you say, I'm accepting the responsibility upon myself, not I'm guaranteeing that that person will give it back, and if not, I will. That's saying, I am personally responsible. I will give back the money. It's like saying that. Okay, directly. How do we know? This is a very weird proof. And in fact, if you want to delve into this further, it's really hard to understand this. The Masoret HaShas, or in my Gemara, it's found in the Haghov, it's Yunim, it's notes on the side. It has a totally different, they quote a different girsa that appears, forget the Maharsha, I think, no, the Shiur Tot, which is Rabbi Chai Gaon, has a different version here, which makes a lot more sense in the Gemara, but I'll just read what we have, which is, and I'll explain the way the Maharsha explains it. Dichtiv tana oto al yadi v'ani yashivenu. How do we know it's kablanut? Because when Reuven promises earlier, when he tries to say to Yaakov, I'll take responsibility, but Yaakov doesn't buy it, he says, right, give it to me and I will return him. In other words, I'm assuming direct responsibility. And they assume, okay, so here's the Maharsha, he says if Reuven assumed a more direct responsibility, and Yaakov didn't accept it, and he did accept Yehuda's, it must be Yehuda was also accepting direct responsibility and not arevut at all. And therefore, that's not a good source. So here's a different source. It's not from the Torah, it's from Mishle, from Proverbs, from the Ketuvim, Dichtiv. Ela Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Mehacha. Let's learn it from here. Lakach bigdo ki arev zar uba'ad nochriach chableu. Okay, first we quote one pasuk in chapter 20. Okay, we're then going to move to chapter 6. Take his cloak because he was an arev for a stranger. And if he did accept it on himself an arevut for a strange woman, chablehu, you can take it from him. Okay, and there you see, you can take something directly from an arev. And Omer, another pasuk, B'ni meravta l're'echa, if you took an arevut for your friend, takata l'zar kapecha, you clapped your hand for a stranger, which really means, sounds like you shook hands and said, I'll take responsibility for the stranger. Or no kasha b'im repicha, this is something else entirely. You stumbled with your words and you said something you shouldn't have said, embarrassed someone maybe. No kadata b'im repicha, and you got trapped by your words. Asezot efo b'ni v'hivnatzil, this is how you get out of what you did, either by taking arevut or by saying something, that embarrassed someone. Ki bata b'kaf re'echa, lechit rapesu rahav re'echa. Okay, this isn't clear what it means in bata b'kaf re'echa. If you came in your friend's hand, lechit rapesu rahav re'echa, rapesu, hard word to translate. And what rahav is, we don't know. Okay, to your friend. So what does this mean? Well, they're going to explain in bata b'kaf re'echa, im mamon yesh lo biyadecha, if it's money that someone else has in your hands, meaning you guaranteed it, relating to the first part of the pasuk, haterlo pisat yad, open up your hand. That's how they understand hitrapes. Haterlo pisat. It's a notricon, they call it, an abbreviation. And open your hands. And what's the rahav re'echa? Imlav harbe elecha re'im. If it was the other, that you embarrassed someone, will then bring a lot of friends and apologize in front of a lot of people. So there you see, okay, if we ignore the second part of the second issue in the pasuk, the first issue is if you gave a commitment, you have to pay. Amar Meimar has a very interesting approach. Arev de mishtabed, whether or not an arev is mishtabed, kilu, until now it sounds like the arev is mishtabed, commits himself, but now, or herself, but now it says arev de mishtabed, machloka Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yossi. The Rabbi Yossi damar smachta kanya arev mishtabed. This is a smachta. What's a smachta? Remember, I never really meant when someone signs a guarantee, right? I had a mortgage, right? So you take out a mortgage. I had to have somebody sign to commit. Did they ever think they were going to pay that money instead of me? No, right? Why would they agree to pay in case I don't pay my mortgage, right? That's a lot of money for someone to pay. So they never really meant, so they never really intended to put the money down, which means that when push comes to shove, you can't force them to because they never really intended it. That's a smachta, or it depends whether you think a smachta is kanya or not. So he says like this: the Rabbi Yossi, who holds a smachta is kanya, even though you didn't really mean it, it doesn't matter. You're right, or you said some exaggerated thing. You still committed. Well, then the arev would be mishtabed. Rabbi Yehuda da amar smachta lo kanya. Rabbi Yehuda says smachta isn't kone. Arev lo mishtabed. So Amalei Rav Ashi lameimar. How could it possibly be? Hamasim b'chol yom da smachta lo kanya. We know that a smachta is lo kanya. We've already learned this. And arev mishtabed. And we do make arevim commit to the guarantors have to commit. So those two things don't go together. How could you say what you said? So Ela Amar Rav Ashi explains why, even though maybe you could view this as a smachta, it would be kona anyway. Because when you sign an arevut, the bank, let's say it's a bank, the bank respects you for doing that. You gain respect from that. And on account of the respect you get for doing that, and the fact that they believe you and they trust you to sign on the mortgage, or on the arevut, that gives you standing. And for that, you're willing to actually really commit to paying the money. Okay, this is a concept we've seen a bunch of times already. Okay, let's finish up. That's the next line. The fact that, right, you make this condition, I could take from anybody I want. Rabbi Chanan says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that's only if you don't have money, the love. But if the love has money, even if you made that condition, you can't take from the arev. That's very nice that Rabbi Yochanan says it. But that's what Rashbag said. And Rashbag disagreed with Tanakama. And how could that be? So the Gemara is going to say, Hamid Katani Seifa, from Shimon Gamliel Omer, Im Yesh Nachasim Lelova Lo Yipara Min Harev, Michlal de Tanakama Savar Losh Nahachi Losh Nahachi. We're assuming the main opinion in the Mishnah disagreed with that because only Rashbag said that. But before Rashbag, we had, if you say Almanat, you can collect from anybody. And that sounds like you can go straight to the Arev. So if Tanakama and Rashbag disagree, why is Rabbi Yochanan holding like Rashbag? To which Gemara answers, really there's words missing, and this is how you should read the Mishnah. We're going back to the beginning. If you lend money, don't collect from the arev. Now, add the word tchila, right, first. Go straight to the love first. And then, unless you made that condition, yiparam in ha'arev, but that's only if the lova has no money. Okay, that's agreed by everybody. What we thought was a machloket, Rashbag and Tanakam was agreed by everyone. What's their machloket? I'll read it this tomorrow, but the Kabbalan is their machloket. A Kabbalan who says, I'm accepting the responsibility on myself, not as a guarantor, but as a Kabbalan, that we're going to have a debate. Okay, and that I'll leave for tomorrow. We'll read that inside tomorrow. So quick review of our daf, late. We start off with the three. We have our Mishna, the braita, and the other braita, which each seem to differ, each one on a different point. And we show what's the basis for the machlokot is otiyot niknot b'misira, or perhaps you need to prove otiyot niknot b'misira, right? You need to prove that it was given to you, even if we hold otiyot niknot b'misira. We had the other opinion about, do you write a star for the love without the presence of the malveh or not, and that affected whether or not you whether we're worried about a kanunya here with a Yosef and Shimon taking out a star and a Yosef and Shimon. And then we got to we just had a small side issue in the Mishnah, seemed to infer something else. And then we had to explain, it must be you knew who the Yosef and Shimon one was. It was just with the Shtarot Shneim Pruim. We had to re-explain a little bit there. And then we got to this other Mishnah about the father who says to the son, one of my documents is paid back. And then we said the son basically can't collect any loan then, unless it was both by the same person, but depending, then Rava said, depends on the language. If you use chov, then no, they couldn't collect anything. And then we went to the next Mishnah about the Arev, and we had a few different ways of reading this Mishnah about what exactly the machloka. We ended with saying that actually what we thought was a machloka Rashbag and the rabbis really isn't a machloka between them. Their machloka is about kablanut and not about arevut. We also saw what's the source for arevut in the Torah, and we found only in psukim from Mishlei, not really from the Torah. And we tried to discuss, is arev a smachta or is it not a smachta? And with that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day and a shavua tov.